morning, good evening, or depending on your time zone, good afternoon, and welcome to our second session of PSAT Prep Live. Let me know in the chat, how's it going? Let's break the chat ice here. Please tell us how you're doing this lovely Sunday. While the hellos and the howdies roll in, let me just introduce myself. If you were not here yesterday, my name is Boris. I'll be your teacher on camera, but I'm not your only teacher. David is going to be joining us behind the scenes, and he's an incredible PSAT expert. In addition, we have two extraordinary PSAT teachers named Steve and Steve. There's 1_Steve and 2_Steve, both of whom are great teachers, and all three of them, Steve, and David, are here. I'm never going to get over saying Steve, and David. Or perhaps David, Steve, and Steve, or Steve, David, and Steve. Anyway, they're all here to answer your questions. We have a very cozy group here joining us live in chat roll, so you're not bugging anyone if you got questions. Please ask, because they are incredible experts and they're here to help you out. Melon is doing good on fall break. That's wonderful. Sravani, good to see you again. Fantastic to see some familiar names here in the chat. I'm doing fantastic. I love the PSAT. Couldn't be more excited. Let's go ahead and get cracking. So we're going to start today with a little bit of math, and we're going to review some of the math content that you will need on the PSAT. Of course, there's a lot of math you got to prep for the PSAT. If you have a prep book or if you take a prep class, you'll go over all of it, but we'll do as much as we can today. We're going to review how to solve algebraic equations, how to do translations, and also how to work on functions and quadratics. So we're touching on a little bit of everything, some basic math, but also some advanced algebra type stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. Isolating a variable. By the time you take the PSAT, we're assuming that you know how to solve an equation. So this is something that we're assuming you know how to do. If not, definitely, get a prep book, take a course, go to some online resources and review how to do this. The idea is that if you have two things that are equal to each other and you do the same thing to both sides, then they'll still be equal to each other. That's a basic logical principle. It's almost not even really math. So that's what we do when we solve an equation. We do the same thing to both sides until the equation is solved. Now, the strategic implication for the PSAT is that the useful things that are good to do to both sides are getting rid of fractions and getting rid of parentheses. So assuming you've got the fundamentals down, that you understand what it means to do the same thing to both sides, if the PSAT tries to scare you by giving you a very scary looking equation, hold your nose, close your eyes, and just take a leap of faith, get rid of all the fractions, get rid of all the parentheses, and then see where you're at. So it's one of those things where it's a little bit scary because you might not know in advance how that equation will be solved, but you can trust that it will be solved as long as you take those steps. So I'll do one question with you, and then I'll give you some to try on your own. As always, please no answers in the chat. If you've got an answer, our amazing poll master David will be live with some polls that you can find below the video player, and you can put your answers in there. We will be deleting answers from the chat. I promise we're not mad or anything. We just want to keep the chat free of spoilers. So here is question number 1. Which of the following values of x is a solution to the equation below? Now, if you recall our math method from yesterday, by the way, I see some more familiar names. Artur, Varchus, welcome aboard. Hello, Camille, good to see you. First thing we do is then identify the question, and then the second thing is the information. So in this case, these two steps are pretty basic. Question's asking for the value of x. Information is the equation with x in it. Okay, cool. So strategy, let's do math. Here we have parentheses and fractions. Now, let me know in the chat, folks, what can we do about that fraction? That pesky 1/2 over here. You'll note, by the way, if you're a very flexible math thinker, that you can do some other stuff here to simplify things a bit before you get rid of the fraction, but just taking the brute force of always get rid of fractions, always get rid of parentheses will work every time on the PSAT. Here, we can multiply both sides of the equation by 2, because if you multiply 1/2 by 2, then you get a 1, and the fraction is gone. So what happens now is there's going to be a 3x minus 1. We're going to have to multiply that other parentheses by 2, minus 2 times the quantity x plus 1. And then also, don't forget that 3 on the other side. Always got to multiply that by 2. That's my Achilles heel. I always forget that. 3 times 2 is 6. So pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Make sure that you see how we got from the original equation to this equation just by following that strategic path of always get rid of fractions. I saw Ethan saying multiply it, Servani saying multiply by 2, Courtney's multiplying it, Cybri 5 folks. Yep, you're with it this morning. By the way, good question from Servani. Can we also plug the answers into X? I love to see that. That's back solving. And yes, that will also work on this question. Now, for me personally, I think that would take longer than doing the algebra, but it's 100% valid. So if you'd rather do it that way on test day, ride like the wind, do it that way. That's the number one rule, is always do whatever works best for you. Okay, so now we've got to get rid of parentheses, and to do that, of course, we distribute. So typically you get rid of fractions by multiplying, and you get rid of parentheses by distributing. There can be some other more interesting cases, but by default, that's what you should think to do. So negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2. And now, just a little bit of cleanup here, right? 3x minus 2x, that's just x. Negative 1 minus 2 is negative 3. Add 3 to both sides, and we've got x equals 9. Now, a couple of things. First of all, pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Ask Steve, David, and Steve in the chat if you're not quite sure how we got from any one of these steps to any one of the other steps. Together, let's also do our fourth step of the math method, is to check, are we done? So yeah, we got x equals 9, but is that actually the answer? It is. Okay. I'm just being, finicky. But always be suspicious. Am I really done? Because you never know. Sometimes the test makers will be like, which of the following values of x minus 5 is a solution? And then the answer would be 4. So don't do that. Just go ahead and grab choice D and move on with the PSAT. Good question from Varchus. Is it faster just to guess some of the answers? And the answer is maybe. For you, maybe not. So that's one of the things that you want to iron out in practice is when is it faster for me to do the proper math, and when is it faster for me to, do some kind of backdoor approach like what we learned yesterday, the back solving and the picking numbers. All right, folks, let's try a question on our own. This is number 2. So I'm going to give a minute and a half. You're not going to see a timer, but you will see me pause my camera and mute while you work on number 2. Also, from our amazing poll master, David, we're going to have a numeric entry poll. So try this one on your own. I'll put the method up on the screen. And we're going to come back in a minute and a half to review it. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review this one. So it says, what's the value of 3a if blah? So step 1, the question, looking for the value of 3a. Step 2, information. Of course, we have this equation with an a in it. Now, strategy, let's practice our algebra skills. This one, notice we kind of have to do algebra because it's a numeric entry, so back solving is not going to be an option. What are we going to do to get rid of these pesky fractions? That's one of the things we always have to do in every equation, is no matter what you think is going on in the problem or how it's going to be solved eventually, You always get rid of fractions. We're going to multiply both sides by 8, Sravani Cybri 5. Now, if you multiplied both sides by 32, which is the product of 8 and 4, that's fine. You'll get the right answer. But it's worth noting that 8 is a much smaller number, and it will also work because 8 cancels an 8, and 8 cancels a 4. So that's just going to be a little bit easier. If you did do 32 or 16, totally fine. You're still going to get the right answer. Now, on the left, 8 times 3/8, the 8's cancel, leaving just a 3. And on the right, 8 times a quarter is just 2. Wow! Notice how much easier that equation looks just with that step. Just by multiplying both sides through by 8, we managed to make this look ridiculously easier. Okay, well, now we get rid of the parentheses. We do that typically by distributing. 3 times 2a is 6a. 3 times -1 is -3. Add 3 to both sides, we're looking at 6a equals 5, and a equals 5, 6. All right, so step 4, are we done? Was that our final answer? Oh, PSAT. It's not our final answer because the test makers asked for 3. Like, do you think anyone at PSAT headquarters thinks that you can do all of this algebra, but then you don't know how to multiply a number by 3? Of course they know that you know how to do that. The reason the test makers do this is just to check to make sure that you're being strategic and that you're not rushing. It's to just separate out those good test takers from those better test takers. And that's why step 4 is in our method. Always check to make sure you're done. Okay, so we're going to multiply both sides by 3. If a is 5 sixths, then 3a is 5 times 3, which is 15 sixths. So we're going to go ahead and bubble in a 1, a 5. And a slash and a 6, or if you prefer, you can simplify and put in a 5, a slash, and a 2. Just so you know, for these numeric entries, it doesn't matter where in the grid you put it if it's a less than 4 character answer, and it also does not matter if you simplify it, as long as the value that you put in is on the number line, you will get the credit. And you could also, even if you want, put in 2.5, right, because 5 halves is equal to 2.5, that's also fine. So fraction, decimal doesn't matter. Simplified, unsimplified doesn't matter. Location in the grid doesn't matter. As long as you put in the correct value on the number line, you're going to get credit on these numeric entries. All right, folks. Nice work on that question. Let's do one more question for some practice. This is PQ1. If you'd be so kind, folks, give this one a shot. There's a little wrinkle here. See if you can navigate around it. I'll see you in a minute and a half to review it. Good luck, and of course, enjoy the practice. All right, everybody, welcome back. So on this one, test makers tried to be a little bit trickier. Test makers are asking for the value of z, that's step 1. Information is this equation that's got a z in it. Oh, but there's also a b in the equation. So how do we deal with that? Well, the test makers give you the value of b. So if you are careful going through the information step, you realize the question's not really as hard as it looks, because you can just plug a 3/4 in for b, and then it's a normal equation. So pause there, digest, make sure that makes sense. PSAT will do this sometimes. It just throw weird things like this in there that aren't actually making the math any harder. It's just like one extra thing to read through and think about. Test makers are expecting that, you know, when they yell boo, that you're going to jump. And I advise you not to do that. Just look at the question, go through the steps. If you can do it, just do it. There's no need to freak out about it. If you can't do it, skip it. If you're skipping a question, also no need to panic about it. Don't let the PSAT get under your skin. All right, well, we're going to plug in the 3/4 for b, and now it's time to simplify. So let me know in the chat, folks, what did you do as your first step in solving this equation for z? You can get rid of these parentheses, which is totally fine. Nothing wrong with that. We'll have to do it at some point anyway. Or you can start by getting rid of the fractions. Here, if you get rid of the fractions, you're going to want to multiply both sides by a multiple of 4. So we can multiply through by 4, for example. That'll clear out both the 4 and the 2. Now, Ethan multiplied both sides by 2. Totally fine. If you multiply both sides by 2 and then multiply by 2 again, it'll be the same as multiplying by 4, and it's totally a fine way to solve it. I saw Arthur and Varchas preferred to distribute. Madeline preferred to multiply by 4. Even in math, you know, personal taste comes into play. Find the way of working these problems that fits your style and fits what you feel is comfortable. Now, if we're going to go ahead and multiply through by 4, here's what happens. Over on the left, a half times 4 becomes 2, because half of 4 is 2. 4 times 5, don't forget, we got to do that. That's 20. And over on the right, 3/4 times 4, the 4's cancel, you're left with a 3. So right off the bat, we multiply through, get rid of the fractions, and immediately this question looks a whole lot simpler. Pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Ask David and the Steves if you're not quite sure how we got here. Now, looking at the poll, it seems like a lot of you got there. Very nicely done. So we're going to do distributing of the 20. That's 20z minus 20. And a bit of cleanup here. 2z plus 20z is 22z. Add 20 to both sides. 3 plus 20 is 23. And lastly, z is 23 over 22. Are we done? Yes, we're done this time because test makers asked for z. We got z. We're going to go ahead and grab choice C for champions and move on with the PSAT. Very, very nice work on this one. You folks smashed it in the poll. Now, in the PDF, there's another question you're welcome to try on your own. Question number 3 is a nice big word problem. Together, I'd like to take a look at translation, which is a skill that will help you solve questions like number 3, which are very wordy, something that the test makers of the PSAT and SAT like a lot. When you have a long word problem that requires translation, a really good tip is to go one phrase at a time from left to right, instead of trying to translate the entire statement in your head in one step. Let me illustrate what I mean by this. Let's say you have a problem where you have to translate this statement. 3y is 7 less than 6x. What a lot of people would do is they would try to like piece it all together in one jump. And I remember this is exactly what I would do in high school, and it was a big headache. I was never really confident in my translations. So one trick I wish someone had shown me, or that I wish I had been, you know, resourceful enough to go look up for myself, is if you go one phrase at a time from left to right, it's much simpler to get the right translation. Let me know in the chat, folks, just this much. Just that. How do you translate 3y is? Well, 3y is 3y, and is means equals. So we're starting off with 3y equals. Now, how about this? How do we translate just this phrase? 7 less than. This is one where you have to be a little bit careful. It's not 7 minus, it's something minus 7. Ah, Sravani, Zay, and Varchis, very nice work here, folks. It's going to be something minus 7, and then all that's left is 6x. So it's got to be 6x minus 7. And look at this. One phrase at a time, from left to right. We end up with the translation without any headaches or any doubts. We just know for a fact this is the correct translation. And Sravani asks a very good clarifying question. Does that mean that 7 has to be after 6x? Exactly. Exactly. Now, you might occasionally see this sort of archaic language, 7 less, just in case you see that. That means 7 minus. But 7 less than, which is way more common, would be something minus 7. Just watch out for that distinction if you are confused about why it's something minus 7 and not 7 minus, even if you don't see 7 less on your test. Knowing that might help you understand why you might get the right translation with this wording. All right, folks, great job on this practice. Let's take it into an actual question. Number 4. I'm going to give you a minute for this one. If you'd be so kind, David, please give us a 1-minute timer. Good luck, folks. See if you can translate this one. And when time is up on my computer, we're going to come back and review. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review. So step 1, we're looking for something that represents the cost per book per day. And information is very interesting. There's an expression with 4 terms in it, point 1, B, D, and 15. And each one of those terms is one of the answers. So we know that one of those things has to represent the cost per book per day. When you get to step 3, the strategy step, one thing that you could do is just eliminate any answers that already mean something other than cost per book. Because logically, each term in this expression can only mean one thing. If something already has another meaning, it cannot also be the cost per book per day. So let me know in the chat, folks, which of the choices can we eliminate? Because what they have in them already has another purpose. By the way, great question from Sravani. Can we plug in different numbers to help us understand it? Absolutely. This is one of the uses of picking numbers, is not just for solving problems, but for increasing your understanding. No pun intended. Check this out. Yeah, because you check out books at the library. Anyway, check this out. We got B is the number of books borrowed. Well, it can't be B. B is not the cost per book per day. That's the number of books you borrowed. D is the number of days. Well, D can't be the cost per book per day because it's the number of days. So right off the bat, A and B need to get out of here. Now between C and D, I saw Arthur and Sravani and Arthur Arthur and Sravani all agreeing that we need to get rid of choice D15. And that's absolutely true because the 15 is just a fixed cost. It's just a flat plus 15. It's not multiplied by any variable. Cost per book per day, you think about that logically, right? Like, the longer I have the books out, the more I pay. And the more books I have out, the more I pay. But that 15 is never changing. So it's like $15 regardless of how many books you have or how many days you check them out for. That makes no sense. It must be the 0.1. And look at this. We're going to grab choice C for champions and move on with the PSAT. All right, now that was kind of like a logic puzzle problem. where you didn't really have to do any math. It was more just about understanding something in the question. Let's take a look at one where you have to do a little bit more work on the translation front. I'm going to give you 90 seconds for this one. I'll give you a hint. Think carefully about the number of hours that Janelle has to pay for. David, if you'd be so kind, please give us a poll for number 5. And folks, I'll see you in a minute and a half. Good luck. Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's review question number 5. So this one, step 1, the question is asking you for the expression that represents the rental charges Janelle will have to pay. The information is how the rental rate is computed. We're told that it's $10 for the first hour, $2 per hour after that, and she rents it for H hours where H is greater than 1. All right, so you see all this information, and a lot of people start to panic, start to get sweats, they start to feel really nervous. We don't want to get worried on test day. We look at the phrase left to right, one piece at a time. Let me know in the chat, folks. How do you translate that first phrase? $10 for the first hour. Well, that's just going to be 10 plus something, right? Because 1 hour goes by, you pay 10 bucks. Okay, so we look at our choices. Choice A needs to go. And this choice got some love in the poll. Notice how if we go one phrase at a time from left to right, we can eliminate this tempting choice because it doesn't have a 10 in it. And we know we're going to have to add a 10 to whatever else we calculate. Now, notice something else. It says, and $2 per hour after that. Let me know in the chat, folks. What do we have to do with that number 2? We're going to need to multiply it by the number of hours that Janelle uses the tiller after the first. So it's going to be $10 plus 2 times some number of hours. Now, nobody picked choice C. Very nice job, folks, identifying that in choice C there's a -2, and that doesn't make any sense. That would imply that Janelle is getting paid money back for renting the power tiller. If she rents it for like a whole day, she's going to make some really sick bank. That's illogical. We're going to get rid of choice C. By the way, Servani, thank you for pointing that out. We do have an error in our PDF. I beg your pardon. It should be H is greater than 1 because it's $10 for the first hour. Now, if the PDF also says $10 for the first 4 hours, then the PDF will have a slightly different answer. but it will be correct, and it will be internally consistent in that case. So in this case, the big split in the poll, about half and half, was between choice B and choice D. Do we add 1 to H, or do we subtract 1 to H? Remember that the thing in the parentheses is how many hours Janelle gets charged for. And this gives us an opportunity to do something that Sravani actually did earlier on her own, which is to use picking numbers to gain an understanding. What I'm going to do is make a little table. Over here, I'm going to put the number of hours that Janelle rented the tiller. And over here, I'm going to put the number of hours that she should get charged for. Let me know in the chat. If Janelle rents the tiller for 2 hours, how many hours is she going to have to pay $2 an hour for? Really nice comments from Varchus and Zayn. Cyber high five. It's going to be 1 less. It's going to be 1. Right, because the first hour she paid $10 for, and then there was 1 more hour after that, so there's 1 hour that she has to pay $2 for. If she rents it for 5 hours, she's going to have to multiply the 2 by 4 hours, because the first hour was $10, not $2, and then the remaining 4 hours are going to be $2 an hour. If she rents it for 10 hours, she's going to have to charge for 9 hours at a rate of $2 per hour. Why not all 10? Because the first one was $10, not $2. So pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Ask David and the Steves if you're not quite sure why we need to subtract 1 from H and not add it. However many hours Janelle rents the tiller, 1 less is going to be the number of hours that she pays $2 per hour for. 1 less because the first hour is not $2 per hour, it's 10. All right, folks, nice job on that little puzzler. Let's go ahead and take a look at another question. If you'd be so kind. Folks, give this one a shot. And David, if you'd be so kind, please give us a poll for PQ2. I'm going to give you 2 minutes on this one. There's a lot of reading and a lot of setting up. I'll give you a hint, though. If you're confident and use the method, you'll be pleasantly surprised by how little time it actually takes to solve this. I'll see you folks in 2 minutes. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's review this question. Here, the test makers are asking for the total number of products produced. That's step 1, the question. Step 2, information, is we're told how much each machine charges. Machine A is $500 to set up and $100 per finished product. Machine B is $800 to set up and $70 per finished product. We're also told that they make the same number of products and the total cost ends up being the same. So, step 3 strategy, let's translate. First, we'll begin with machine A. Long phrase there, but we're going to whip out our old trick, which is to do one phrase at a time from left to right. Tell me please in the chat, how do I translate just this phrase? $500 to set up the machine. The way that's written, $500 to set up the machine, implies that you're always going to pay that $500 no matter how many times you use the machine. In fact, if you hire the machine and go, whoopsie, I don't feel like doing this anymore, and then you leave, you're still out $500. So that is going to have to be $500 plus something. You're paying $500 no matter what. How do I translate the second phrase of that sentence? $100 per finished product. What would I do to translate that? Nice work, Sravani. Very good, everybody. That would be plus 100x, where x is a variable I've made up for the number of products that I did with machine A. I don't know how many products I'm doing, so we'll call it x, and I'm paying $100 for each of them. Okay, so pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. You see how this phrase that I've got highlighted in green for machine A translates one phrase at a time to 500 plus 100x. Now, let's take a look at machine B. Well, it's the exact same thing, just with different numbers. Instead of 500, the setup is 800. Instead of $100 per product, it's $70 per product. So you get this translation, 800 plus 70x. Again, pause, digest, and make sure that makes sense. Now, what do we need to do with these? Well, we're told the total cost is the same and the number of products produced is the same. That means we just need to set these equal to each other. Do please pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Make sure you see why I took these two phrases and set them equal. This is a good question to ask David, Steve, and Steve if you're not quite sure where that equal sign came from. So now we simplify. Subtract 70x from both sides. You get 100x minus 70x is 30x. Subtract 500 from both sides. That means that 30x equals $300. And divide both sides by 30. 300 over 30 is 10. Now, is that our final answer? Yes. The way this is written, x is the number of products that were made, and that is what the test makers wanted. So we're going to grab, finally, my favorite choice of all time, totally unbiased, B for Boris, and move on with the PSAT. Now, I love this comment from Varchis. They made this problem pretty easy because the difference of setups is 300 and the difference per product is 30, so it has to be 10, right? Yes, if you see that, absolutely do that. That is the fastest way to do it. Of course, most people don't see that. About 20% of us got this question wrong. It was by no means a trivial question. So if you think it's easy, that means you're on the path to PSAT greatness. This one is not easy for the general population. All right, folks, great work. There's one kind of similar to PQ2, number 6 in the PDF. So that's page 19 of the PDF. Give that one a shot on your own for some extra practice. Together, let's continue on and get into some advanced algebra. We're going to review function notation and real-life situations with functions. So kicking off with function notation, if you have something like this, f of x equals x squared, what that means is that x is the input, and to generate the output, you square it. So let me know in the chat, folks, what would be something like f of 5? To find f of 5, you would replace all the x's with 5s. So instead of saying f of x equals x squared, you'd say f of 5 equals 5 squared, and that is, of course, 25. If you were to graph this function, the point 5, 25 would be on the graph. X is the x-coordinate of a point on the graph, and then whatever you get as the output is the y-coordinate of the graph. This is why a lot of teachers, when they teach functions for the first time, if students are having a hard time understanding, will say something like, just pretend that f of x is the same thing as y. We'll see some problems where that breaks down, like where you do need function notation to figure things out. usually when there's more than one function and some nesting is going on. But for basic function questions, you can kind of substitute y for f of x and then proceed as usual. Now, there are two terms the PSAT might throw at you, so just briefly to make sure you know those, domain and range. Domain is basically what x is allowed to be. And let me know in the chat, folks, what is x allowed to be in this example function? Well, anything, really. Mathematicians would call this all real numbers, because you can square whatever you want to. An example of something with a limited domain would be like f of x equals the square root of x, because you can't take the square root of a negative. So that would be a case where it wouldn't be all real numbers, it would just be positive numbers and 0. The counter side to that, of course, is range. Range is what the output can be. Let me know in the chat, folks, what could the output be for this function? Very nice, Varchus. Very good, Zion. Very good, Ethan and Servani. Cyber high, folks. This would be 0 and all positive numbers. So you can just say 0 or greater than or equal to 0, or you could say positive numbers and 0. Because when you square a number, you can't get a negative. So there's no way that you're going to get a negative out of a real input x. If you want an example of a function that would have an unlimited range, then just take away the square, right? If you say something like f of x equals x, well, then x can be anything. And of course, f of x, which is equal to x, could also be anything. All right, so one thing the PSAT is keen on is making sure that you understand just how to use function notation. We'll do a really basic question together, so if you're kind of fuzzy on this, you'll get some practice with it. But then we'll take a look at some more challenging questions, and that will be for some independent practice. So number 7, the linear function h is defined by blah. What is the value of h of 5? All right, so step 1, the question's asking for the value of h of 5. Step 2, information, we're told that h of x equals 7x minus 20. Now, to solve this, we're going to put a 5 in for x here. So it'll become h of 5 equals 7 times 5 minus 20. Pause, digest, ask David, Steve, and Steve if you're not quite sure how I got this expression or this equation. H of 5 equals 7 times 5 minus 20. I've drawn some arrows to illustrate this visually, but if you're not quite sure and want some expert assistance on that, pop that answer right now in the chat. Well, if you can get here, then we're pretty good, right? Because 7 times 5 is 35, and 35 minus 20 is, of course, 15. Are we done? Yeah, we found h of 5. We can grab choice C for champions and move on with the PSAT. So that would be a basic difficulty PSAT question, just checking to make sure that you know how to use function notation. That when you see h parentheses 5 parentheses, you don't freak out and have no idea what's going on. Of course, some more advanced questions can happen, like number 8. So David, if you'd be so kind, please bring out a numeric poll for number 8. Folks, I'm going to give you a minute to wrestle with this one. We got multiple functions and we have nesting. So see if you can figure out how to beat this. I'll see you in a minute to review. Good luck. Hey everybody, welcome back. Let's review question number 8. So the test makers here in step 1 are asking for the value of c of d of 2. The information is we're given function c and function d. So strategy time, the way you do these is you begin in the middle. For clarity, I'm even going to mark out the c function in the parentheses. Just look at d of 2. Let me know in the chat, folks. Just ignoring the c stuff completely in this question. What is d of 2? Well, for that, we're going to plug 2 into function d. So instead of d of x is x squared minus 5x plus 6, it'll be d of 2 equals 2 squared minus 5 times 2 plus 6. 2 squared is 4. 4 minus 10 plus 6. We're looking at a 0. Those cancel. So pause there, digest, make sure that makes sense. We got that d of 2 is 0. Very nice, Travani. Very nice, Varchus. Very good, Adrian. You nailed it. Now, step 4, are we done? Well, no, we're not done because there is the c stuff. So what you have to do is replace d of 2 with a 0. Right? If d of 2 equals 0, then c of d of 2 is the same thing as c of 0. Pause there, digest, ask Steve and David and Steve if you're not quite sure why that's true. But that's the key moment in this question, is when you realize that you have to now plug a 0 into function c. If that makes sense, then we're done because c of 0 is pretty easy to calculate. You just replace all the x's with zeros, and that leaves you with nothing but a 3. Step 4, are we done now? Yes. We're out of things to calculate. Bubble in a 3 anywhere in the grid, and move on with the PSAT. Beg your pardon, folks. Let me bubble that 3 in there. And move on with the test. Now, I've noticed that the slides, I think, unsynced, so you might not be seeing the same thing that I'm seeing. Let me know, folks, and private teacher, or off-camera teachers, let me know if you're seeing number 8. I beg your pardon, they're moving again. Let me know, please, if you're seeing number 8 on your screen. Okay, hang on. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to re-share this deck. I think that will be a faster solution than trying to wrangle out of it. So beg your pardon for that, folks. Okay, there we go. This question tests another trick the test makers might use to try to make function questions difficult. The test makers might not give you the actual definition of a function. They might instead give you tables. So I'm going to give you a minute to wrestle with this one. David, if you'd be so kind, please give us a 1 minute or a poll for PQ3. Folks, please let me know if you're not seeing PQ3 on your screen. Hopefully we are at this point, but let me know if you're not so we can fix it. And I'll see you in 60 seconds to review. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. If you were stumped on this one, that's okay. That's exactly why we have these lessons, is to help you get stumped now in practice so you're not stumped when you're taking the PSAT, perhaps, on Wednesday. When you're given a table, what that means is that the PSAT is being a little coy with you. They're saying, like, we're not going to give you the function. We're just going to give you some sample values. Let's focus over here on this table with g of x. The PSAT could have just said what g of x is, but they didn't. What they're saying instead is, hey, you know what? I'm not going to tell you g of x, but I will tell you that when you plug -1 into g, you get 3. So g of -1 is 3. We'll tell you that. And, you know, we'll be nice. We'll also tell you that when you plug in a 1, you get -1. And that when you plug in a 2, you get -3. When you plug in 0, you get 1, and so on. Pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. The test makers in a question like this are checking whether you understand this basic idea. Like, what does it mean to have a table where one column is x and the other column is function of x? It means this. You're getting a sampling of values for that function, a sampling of inputs and outputs, but you're not given the function definition. Now, if that makes sense, then we're in business. It's actually a question you can solve in about 5 seconds as long as you're solid on this concept. We have nesting, so again, begin in the middle. Let me know in the chat, folks, what is g of 1? Nice job, Adrian. Cybri5. If you understand how the table works, then you know from the middle row of the g table that g of 1 is -1. Now, are we done? No, we're not done. So watch out for choice C. That's a trap. This is just g of 1. But the test makers are asking for f of g of 1. So we're going to cross off g of 1, stick a -1 in there. Now it's like, okay, what's f of -1? Coincidentally, that is again the middle row of the function. This time it's function f. And that table tells you that when you plug -1 into f of x, you get a 1 out. Now are we done? Yes, that right there is the final value. We're grabbing D for domination and moving on with the PSAT. For some more challenging practice with tables, you can take a look at question number 9 on your own. Highly recommend checking out that problem. Together, let's take a look at our final math topic, which is real-life situations with functions. Now, a lot of the time, when we say real-life situation with functions, that means that you are given a table. The trick for table questions is to do trial and error. Basically, test the choices until you find the one that fits the table. I know it's a lot of theory talk, so I'll do one with you, and then I'm going to give you one to try entirely on your own. So, take a look with me at this question. This is number 11 in your PDF on page 30. Let's work through the method together. It says a landlord charges a late fee for late payments. The table shows the number of late payments the landlord got for rent over the last 6 months and the earnings from the late fees associated with them. Which of the following functions, respectively, corresponds or correctly represents their relationship? Okay, so question is we're looking for a choice that fits this table. Information is the choices in the table. So step 3 strategy, let's do some trial and error. As we jump into the choices to do trial and error, we notice that 2 of the choices say f of p and 2 of them say p of f. So actually you can cross off 2 choices immediately without doing any trial and error at all. Let me know in the chat, folks. Which 2 choices can we eliminate? Get rid of. Because they're describing a relationship that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Well, C and D don't really make logical sense because they imply that the number of late payments depends on the earnings from late fees. That would be like if the landlord's like, I'm going to charge you $150 in late fees. And then you're like, fine then, I guess I'll pay late 6 times. Suck on that. Like, that doesn't make any sense, right? First, people pay late. And then depending on how often they pay late, the landlord will charge a fee. So we've got to get rid of choices C and D because they say that the number of payments depends on the amount the landlord collects, when in reality it's backwards. Now, between A and B, it's a pretty quick choice to test. I see actually Varchas and Courtney were already getting rid of choice B, which is fantastic. Yeah, just pick the easiest row, like March. Okay, March is 2 and 50. But when I plug a 2 in to choice B, I do not get 50. I get 27. 25 plus 2 is not 50. So we're done here. Remember, your attitude needs to be, I'm a PSAT god. If you think that B, C, D are wrong, they are wrong because you're awesome. You can just grab choice A without even checking it and move on with the test. So here, take a moment, pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Ask David, Steve, and Steve if you're not quite sure why we got rid of C and D to begin with, and then why we got rid of choice B. Well, let me give you now one to do on your own. Question number 12. If you'd be so kind, David, please give us a poll for number 12. I'll give you folks a minute and a half to work on it. Then we're going to review it and take a break before doing some verbal. I'll see you folks in 90 seconds. Good luck. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review. So step one, the question is, what choice matches the table? Which of these functions fits the table? Step two, information. We got the table, we got the choices. Not much going on there. And thankfully on this one, the choices are all K of S. So we don't need to do any, brain work trying to figure out which variable's on the outside, which variable's on the inside. We just can go straight to strategy and start plugging stuff in. Now, the easiest row, of course, is 0, 0. Love to see it. Let me know in the chat, folks, which answer choice can you eliminate because it doesn't fit the easiest row here, 0, 0. Choice D. 1 plus 0 is not 0, 1 plus 0 is 1. Nice try, D. D for dang. We're going to grab that. We're going to get rid of that choice and keep looking. Now, between A, B, and C, we can test another row. So when S is 10, the answer should be 225. We look at our choices, and choice A, when you multiply 2.25 by 10, you get 22.5, not 225. So A doesn't work. Choice B and choice C, you might notice they're the same, but C has an extra, I guess you could say, one fewer decimal space. It's an extra power of 10. So you know that only one of these is going to work and the other one is not. If you try choice B, 10 squared is 100. So we're looking at 2.25 times 100, and that is 225. So choice B works. You should check on test day to make sure you've eliminated all the wrong answers, because it's possible that multiple choices work for one row, but don't work for the others. For example, 3 of these choices worked for the row 0, 0. So if you had just looked at choice A and been like, yep, 0, 0, and picked it, you would have gotten the question wrong. But in this case, you can be strategic and say, well, I don't need to check choice C. Choice C is the same thing as B, but multiplied by 10. So there's no way that it's going to be the same value. You can cross it off without doing it. And we're finishing math this weekend with my totally unbiased favorite answer choice of all time, choice B, for Boris. Now, there's an amazing question from Madeline. I was going to actually bring this up. So, Madeline, Cybright 5, you're the PSAT teacher of the hour here. Madeline says, can't we get rid of A because the increase in kinetic energy is not linear? If you're savvy enough to do what Madeline did, you should. Yeah, these are not linear. It goes up by 225, then like by 275, then by like 400. Not the same increase, means it's not linear, so A needs to go. Nice catch. That was fantastic. Good question from Adriana. Are we allowed to use calculators during the PSAT? And the answer is sometimes. There's a calculator math section, which is most of the questions, and then a non-calculator math section, which is not as big, but there are some questions where you cannot use a calculator. All right, folks, great job. Well, our next topic is going to be reading, but let's take a break if you'd be so kind. Folks, please stand up, stretch, relax, and enjoy life for 5 minutes. Get a screen break. Rich, our tech wizard, I forgot to give you the shout out of the day, so he's the magician making everything work behind the scenes technologically. Rich, if you'd be so kind, please give us a 5-minute timer for the break room. We'll see everybody in 5 minutes to work on verbal. Enjoy, everybody. Hey everybody, welcome back from the break. Today we're going to kick off our verbal practice with the method for PSAT reading questions. Now we can't do any questions until we have a passage, and there's no particular reason not to let you do the passage on your own, since that's what we practiced yesterday, the passage strategy. Remember, the idea is that when you read, you should not try to memorize or understand the passage. Instead, your goal should be to create an outline and next to each paragraph, put like the topic of that paragraph. So try that today. I'm going to give you this passage to read and annotate on your own, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do it. Practice yesterday's method of focusing on the topics and making an outline and not trying to memorize details or understand everything that's going on. You will need the handout for this because, of course, I cannot give you the entire passage on the screen all at once. The passage begins on slide 34. And it says that questions 1 to 10 refer to it. Now, you don't need to do any other questions yet. I'm just going to give you 5 minutes to read and annotate the passage. Good luck. We'll see you in 5 minutes to review. All right, everybody, well done. Let's review. So this one has a nice blurb. They won't always be this nice on test day, but this blurb is fantastic. It tells you what the passage is about. It's about Black Monday, which was a crisis of economics, and we even get this nice bonus language, causes and effects, so you can tell that there's going to be probably some paragraphs describing the causes and some describing the effects. So paragraph 1 is kind of like our background paragraph. Don't need to annotate that much here. Get your topic, and you move on to paragraph 2. Now let me know in the chat, folks, what was paragraph 2 about? Zayn's right, by the way. This is the same passage that we used last year. In fact, the whole course is the same as the one that we used last year. We do the same one each year. Although, for those of you who are not in 11th grade and you're planning to come back, we'll probably have a different one next year just because the SAT and PSAT are changing to a digital format. And it's not just going digital, but they're changing the structure of the test. So we'll need to make a new PSAT Prep Live for next time. So this one is basically in line with what the topic told us. We're starting to get into the causes of this crash. First paragraph introduced us to the crash, and this one is starting to get into some of the causes. Now, if you happen to catch exactly what the causes were, or at least the ones that were talked about in this paragraph, you can certainly put that in your notes. It was globalization, which of course you can abbreviate. You don't need to type out the whole word the way that I have. But even if you don't catch that, that's totally fine. As long as you get that this is a paragraph about causes, if a question asks about causes leading up to the crash, you'll know to look it up in this paragraph. Next up, we have a paragraph that has a really fantastic topic sentence. Let me know in the chat, folks, what did you annotate for this paragraph? Notice we have some lovely timing keywords. Days before the crash. So, days before. And then we also have sequencing keywords. Look at this. First, second, and third. So there are, you could have said, 3 signs that a crash was about to happen. Pause, digest, make sure that makes sense. Ask David, Steve, and Steve if you have any questions about how we're annotating this. Remember, there's no one right way to annotate. You got to find a voice and a method that works well for you. Now, if that makes sense, look at how nicely the second paragraph or the next paragraph kicks off. It says all weekend prior to the crash. So if this paragraph was days before, this paragraph would be the weekend before. And if you wanted to, you could have annotated what happened here. These were some, crashes around the world. Bunch of bad stuff was happening around the world prior to that Monday. Ethan, by the way, very nice paraphrase. Exactly what I was thinking. 3 signs. Great. Pop that in your outline, and you're good to go with that paragraph. Okay, what happened in the next paragraph? Again, look at these lovely timing keywords. When the opening bell rang on Monday morning, this is it, the moment we've been waiting for, the day of the crash. What actually happened that Monday morning as the stock market plummeted? And then we have this paragraph here, which does something that the blurb predicted. And we were happy to see because we could anticipate it. Let me know in the chat, folks, what sort of information did we get in this paragraph? Nicely done here, everybody. This is the effects. The opening blurb said the passage is about causes and effects, and we had a bunch of causes. We had the crash, haven't had any effects yet. This is it. And if, like Servani, you notice, what sort of effects there were, like the circuit breaker, totally fine. You can put that in. If you put something like regulations, totally fine. As long as you got at least that this was the consequences paragraph, you are good to go as far as your annotation skills. Okay, now let's take a look at our question method. This is the way that we approach questions in PSAT reading. The idea is that if possible, we should try to predict answers. And this, by the way, is in your PDF on slide 33, these 4 steps. You want to read the question carefully and unpack it. That means try to figure out what the question's asking you for and where the answer will be in the passage. Then hopefully you can do some research, figure out the answer before ever looking at a choice, and use your prediction to quickly spot the one correct answer. Hopefully that's what happens. Now, the trick is that there are some questions where it is difficult to do this. For example, if you get a question that's very open-ended, like the passage implies which of the following, there's not really anything to unpack there. You're not given anything to go on. That's going to be tough to predict. In a question like that, you're going to go to the choices. So one of the things that you have to decide with every question on the reading test, and one skill I hope you develop through practice, is determining after reading a question whether it's a question you want to predict for, or whether it's better to jump into the choices and check the choices against the text. The better that you get at making the right decision for you on questions, and sometimes different people will choose differently, the more comfortable and in control that you'll feel on the test. Let's take a look at our first question here. Number 1, the passage is primarily concerned with what? Well, this one you want to predict. Because if you're doing the Kaplan passage strategy, there's no reason why you shouldn't already know in advance what the passage was primarily concerned with. Let me know in the chat, folks, what was the main concern of this passage? This passage's main concern was what caused the Black Monday crash and what some of the consequences were. Like, we already know that because we did the big picture. If you correctly execute the Kaplan passage strategy, you are going to know what the primary purpose of the passage was every single time. All right, so now that we've got a prediction, and we'll side by 5, everybody from Courtney leading the charge on down to Servani, excellent. Now we're looking for a choice that says this. Go ahead and vote in the poll provided by our amazing poll master, David, for the answer choice that you would pick on test day. All right, folks, nice work. The test makers avoided using the name Black Monday, which all of us had in our prediction. But still, there is only one choice that refers to Black Monday, and that is choice D, the stock market crash of 1987. It's the only one that even tries. So we're going to have to grab D for domination and move on with the PSAT. Neither A, nor B, nor C focus on the Black Monday crash specifically. And you have to watch out because sometimes wrong answer traps on these big picture questions will talk about things that the passage did. Like, this passage did discuss the ways in which financial markets are intertwined. It's true that there were a couple of paragraphs that talked about that, but that wasn't the main point of the passage. The main point was all tied into the Black Monday crash. All right, let's take a look at number 2. The author would agree with which statement about the 1987 global economic crisis and its effects? This is a bit more of an open-ended question because would most likely agree with is pretty broad. But we have a nice clue here, which is effects. Now let me know in the chat, folks, which paragraph is most likely to have information about the effects of Black Monday. That would be the final paragraph, which we annotated as the effects paragraph. Now, you don't need to read that entire paragraph over and try to memorize everything in it. This is a case where you can choose to jump into the choices, but say, I will check each choice against the final paragraph. If the answer is not in the final paragraph, I'm going to assume that that is not the correct answer. Okay, so grab your handout, go to the final paragraph of the passage, and take a look at each choice. Eliminate the choices that do not line up with what the last paragraph said, and then vote in Pollmaster David's awesome poll for the choice that you end up picking. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's go ahead and review. Choice A says there were, my favorite line of all time, no real consequences. No, that's ridiculous. There was a whole paragraph of consequences. Bye-bye, choice A. Similarly, nobody voted for choice D. This is wildly off topic. We're not talking about computer and human viruses. There was like a line, like a simile, something spread like a virus, but that is not the point of the passage at all. So we're going to get rid of choice D. Now, B and C are very similar, and I want to make a broader point here. A lot of people get pretty angry when they do reading comp on standardized tests. They think, oh, this is a dumb question. Yeah, it just kind of depends on how you look at it. Don't do that. Let your competition throw points down the drain by arguing with the test makers. What you ought to do is take a deep breath and say, okay, I embrace the fact that there is one correct answer and the other three are wrong. There are no good answers and better answers. There is one right, and the other three are objectively, incontrovertibly wrong. Which means if I think two choices are both good, I am wrong. I've missed something. And look for that thing, and if you find it, you can get the right answer and move on with your life. Do not waste your neurons. Do not waste time or energy on test day being mad at the test. It's a good test in the sense that there will always be one correct answer, the other three are wrong, and there's no real arguing with it. So here, if you're stumped between B and C, as I see in the poll, a lot of us were, break the choices into bits and check each bit against the passage, or in this case, check each bit against just the last paragraph. If you have a choice where all of the things are good, everything checks out, then you pick that answer, because the right answer must have nothing wrong with it. However, every wrong answer will have at least one little bit that's incorrect. Look at choice B. It says mostly negative effect. Mostly is a very important word. This is a word you should watch out for, by the way. Most means more than half. Let me know in the chat, folks, do we have proof in this passage that globalization has had more than half negative effect? Like the negative effects outweigh the positive effects in general? Whenever you get this word, it does not mean the choice is wrong, but it does mean that the passage needs to have specific quantitative information to let you draw that more than half conclusion. And we don't have that here. All we know from this passage is that globalization contributed to the crash, but we do not know that globalization has been more negative than positive, that more than half of the effects of globalization on financial markets have been negative. Courtney's like, no, ... Courtney, don't feel bad. Over half of us picked choice B. This was the majority answer. But if you look at it piece by piece, that piece is wrong and does not fit the passage. So we're going to go ahead, grab choice C for champions, and skedaddle. Now I'm going to be a little bit cagey about how we know that C is the correct answer, because the next question is a command of evidence. When you have command of evidence questions, these, I would say, are always predict. You should always predict the answer to these, because there's no reason to look at all the choices and read every single reference. That takes an enormous amount of time and is also just really annoying. Instead, go back to your answer and think. If somebody was not convinced that I had picked the correct answer, what would I point them to in the passage to convince them beyond any doubt that I'm right? In retrospect, the signs of an impending financial crisis leading to Black Monday were somewhat obvious. Let me know in the chat, folks, which paragraph would prove to an imaginary friend that there were somewhat obvious signs that a crash was coming our way. We actually annotated it this way. Ethan told us 3 signs for this paragraph. So we're going to go back there, and it says, days before the crash, 3 signs. There it is. That's where we have these somewhat obvious signs that a crash is coming, and it's the very first sentence. In the days before the crash, there were portentous signs akin to crumbling rocks signaling an impending avalanche. All right, so the correct answer needs to include those lines, 32, 33, and 34. Look at our answer choices. Is there a choice that includes those lines? There sure is. We're going to grab choice B for Boris and move on with the PSAT. Command of evidence questions for many people are their least favorite question type to begin with, but with some practice it can become your very most favorite question type, because either you quickly find the answer and move on, or you make a prediction and it's not there, then you quickly skip it and move on. These questions should not suck up any of your time on test day. Okay, now I do want to give you a chance to do some questions on your own, so let's do a few. I'm going to give you a minute to try question number 4. Try this approach, decide how much, if at all, you want to predict using clues, and we'll see you in 60 seconds to review it. David, if you'd be so kind, please give us a poll for this question. Good luck, everybody, and enjoy the practice. All right, folks, let's go ahead and review number 4. This one says, what does the first paragraph most strongly suggest? Well, heck, the first paragraph could suggest a whole lot of things. So you don't have to predict specifically on this one. But what you can do is dive into the choices with the knowledge that the right answer should come from this paragraph. Let's take a look at our options. Choice A says that Asian markets are more volatile than United States markets. This is a comparative choice. In order for this choice to be correct, the author has to make a specific comparison in these lines. Now you look at the first paragraph, never says that. We're going to get rid of choice A. Choice B says slight fluctuations are not cause for alarm. This paragraph does talk about slight fluctuations. It says that daily gains and losses are normal in small amounts. Great, you can stop there. Because if you see a choice and you go, yep, that's the choice, trust yourself. Be brave. Grab B for Boris and move on with the PSAT. I know it's scary not looking at C or D, but why would you look at C and D? You're not taking the PSAT to read stuff, or to think about stuff, or to figure out puzzles. You're taking this test to circle correct bubbles on a Scantron and get a scholarship. Once you know which bubble to circle, you should circle it and move on. Trust yourself, because at the end of the day, you are a PSAT god. Okay, let's take a look at the next one, number 5. What does measures mean in line 49? I'll give you a hint. These questions are always predict. Anytime you're asked for the meaning of a word in a line, you should go there, figure that word out, and then look at the choices. Until you do that, the choices are a waste of time. David, please give us a poll for number 5. I'll see you folks in a minute. Good luck. Nice work, folks, here. The test makers are asking you for the meaning of the word measures right there. One thing you can do to predict on these is basically blank the word out so that your mind is not muddled by the word that's there. You probably already have some ideas of what measures means. Knock all that out. Just clear it out of your head and say, okay, if it's just a blank, what am I putting in there? The government said they were prepared to respond with actions to bring stability to the value of the US dollar. They were prepared to do something to bring stability to the value of the US dollar. So we take a look at our answer choices. If you're observing something, that's not doing anything. If you have units, that's not doing anything. If you're calculating something, that's just you sitting on a calculator. It's still not really doing anything for anyone else. Only choice C refers to actions that would make a difference to other people. We're going to grab C for champions and move on with the test. Zayan, Cybri 5, you got there. All right, folks, we got to do some grammar today, so let's take a look at one final reading question. The PDF has a lot of practice. It's a really fantastic resource. Remember, by the way, that the second half of the PDF is an answer key, so you do have a way to review everything that you do. Let's do one last question together. Number 6. If you'd be so kind, David, please bring up our final reading poll. And folks, try this one on your own. I'll see you in a minute to review it. Good luck and enjoy the practice. All right, everybody, let's review question number 6. Test makers are lovely here. They tell you, look in the third paragraph, and they ask you for a warning sign. Cool thing about this question is you definitely want to predict, because we have these awesome numeric keywords in this paragraph. You can look at the warning signs right now. So we'll highlight those in peach. What do we got? Large daily losses around the world. Number 2, lots of sell-offs. Number 3, lots of expiration dates falling on the day. The correct answer's got to be one of these things. Now, 100% of you picked choice B. Large losses in international markets on one day, less than a week before the crash. So you have to do a little bit of checking to make sure the test makers weren't trying to slip one past you. October 14th, was that less than a week? Yes. October 19th was the day on the crash. That's 5 days. It's less than a week. Check the mumbo jumbo. Make sure it's the right mumbo jumbo, but all you did that. We're grabbing choice B for Boris to end our reading practice for today. Do try the remaining questions for this passage, 7, 8, 9. And then also there is a whole, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And also there's a whole extra passage, questions 11 through 20. This is if you want to practice some science. Highly recommend it. It's free practice material that you got for coming here today, so take advantage of it. Heck, share it with your friends if you want. Try this passage on your own under test-like timing and see what you can do with the passage method, and now after today, the question method. All right, folks, let's take a look at our final topic of the day. We're going to review some grammar rules. In particular, we're going to focus on punctuation and sentence structure. This is one of the quickest ways to raise your score, because anytime a question tests one of these rules, if you know the rules, you can quickly find the answer. So let's get to it. One thing the PSAT is somewhat obsessed with is how to connect phrases and sentences. For example, if I say something like, "It was cold today, I stayed inside," that would be wrong, because "it was cold today" is a complete sentence, "I stayed inside" is a complete sentence, and here's the rule: you're not allowed to connect two complete sentences with a comma. That is illegal. So let me know in the chat, folks, what can we do to fix this issue? What's one way that we can take this wrong sentence and make it acceptable? You can upgrade that comma. If you use a semicolon, this becomes fine. If you use a period, that's fine too. Now, if you're a little bit fuzzy on semicolons, I have some really good news for you. You know semicolons. You might not think you know, but you definitely know, because semicolons are the same thing as periods. By the way, Madeline, Courtney, Samurai 5. Yeah. A period connects two complete sentences, and a semicolon does the same thing. Now, of course, English teachers would be mad to hear me say that, because they'd be like, well, actually, a semicolon implies a certain pause which delineates a connection between... Nobody cares. On the PSAT, all we care about scoring points. And on the PSAT, period and semicolon are literally the same thing. So you check both sides. If there's a complete sentence on both sides, either of those punctuation marks will work. Now, at this point, a lot of people, Adrienne, Zion, we got Artur's thinking about this, Sravani's thinking about it, Courtney's thinking about it, Michael's got the acronym that I'm about to show, Cyber 5, yep. We can add a conjunction like so. Now, this is, again, the same thing as a period. Comma plus a fanboy's word connects two complete sentences, just like a period does, just like a semicolon does. And if you're not familiar with fanboy, if you're not sure what Michael's talking about, here's the acronym. Fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. These are 7 words that come after a comma, and as a team, the comma and a fanboy's word can connect two complete sentences. Now with fanboys, of course, there are differences, so I'm being a little bit glib to say that it's the same thing as a period or a semicolon, because of course if you say but, that's different than if you say and, right? Because but implies contrast and does not. And so implies cause and effect, but a lot of the other ones do not, and so on. So like there is meaning difference, but grammatically, comma fanboys is the same thing as a period, and that's the same thing as a semicolon. Now there's actually a suggestion I almost never get when I do this example, so Sravani, Cyber 5. We can say, since it was cold today, I stayed inside. What a comma can do is attach a phrase to a sentence. So if you have some kind of like introductory phrase, you can put a comma after it and then put a complete sentence after that. So basically, commas cannot connect two complete sentences, but if you downgrade one of the complete sentences and make it a fragment, then you can use the comma to connect it. In fact, then a comma is the only thing that will work. No other punctuation mark will work in that example that I currently have highlighted in peach. Now there's two other punctuation marks that we got to bring up. These come with some special rules. First up is the colon. It was cold today, colon, I stayed inside. Now let me know in the chat, going into today's class, what did you most strongly associate with colons? Most people, when they see colons, they think of lists. The thing is, colons can be used to introduce lists, but lists are not the only thing that colons are for. Colons can introduce anything. They can introduce examples, they can introduce consequences, they can introduce effects, they can introduce names or quotations, they can introduce anything. And the way it works grammatically on the PSAT is this. You have complete sentence, then colon, and then stuff that was introduced. Then a period. So that's the rule you want to know for the PSAT. If you know this rule, then you can always check that a colon's done correctly. Basically, with a colon, there may be a complete sentence on both sides, but there only has to be a complete sentence on the left. This is different from a semicolon, period, or a comma fanboys, where there needs to be a complete sentence on both sides. And then lastly, we can use a dash. Now, dashes are a really sneaky punctuation mark. For now, what I will say about dashes is that if you could use a semicolon, you can use a dash, but not necessarily the reverse. Because a dash indicates a hesitation or a break in thought. You are like interrupting yourself with a dash. So anytime you would use a period, you can put a dash instead, but the reverse is not necessarily true. So that's one way you can check for dashes is if I were able to use a period here, then I could use a dash as well. All right, now take a moment, digest. There are some rules in your PDF that you can review on the subsequent slides, but if you want these homespun notes, feel free to take a screenshot or grab them now. We'll do a question together, and I'll wrap things up today by giving you some questions to try on your own. All right then, let's get into it. We have this passage, The Evolution of Dance, Classical to Modern. Remember, you do want to read the passage, don't skip the text. Always read everything because you're going to need it for at least some of the questions. Today, modern dance and classical ballet appear to be different forms of dance that exist on opposite ends of the formal spectrum. Despite their differences, because modern dance was born as a reaction to classical ballet, the two forms have a deep and rich relationship. Each form developed from a desire to express emotions through the movements of dance. All right, here we go. In the 16th century, Catherine de' Medici, an Italian noblewoman and a great patron of the arts, began funding ballet in the French court. The programs of dance, costume, song, music, and poetry that were put on at her festivals came to be called ballet de cour. A century later, King Louis XIV of France popularized the form by dancing himself, and his love of ballet elevated it from a pastime for amateurs to an endeavor that required professional training. All right, so writing method from yesterday. First, what's the topic? And then step 2, eliminate. Now here we have himself, punctuation mark, and then some kind of connecting word. So this is definitely going to be a punctuation question. Now, what you often will do in a question like this is break the sentence at the conjunction or at the punctuation mark and ask yourself, is there a complete sentence on both sides? There is. On both sides of the word and, there is a complete sentence. So we're going to eliminate choices that are not valid for connecting complete sentences. And this is a really good question to illustrate step 3 of the method. Remember, this is where you check correct, concise, and relevant. Because only one choice fails, B is the only choice here that is not a valid way of connecting two complete sentences. With A, we're using comma fanboys, so that works. With D, we're using a semicolon, and you can begin a sentence with however comma, so that works. And then choice C, the comma is being used to connect a phrase to a sentence. Although his love of ballet, blah, 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 would be a phrase, that is not a complete sentence. and then before the comma is a complete sentence, so that is fine. So there's 3 choices that survive the elimination in step 2. But in step 3, correct, concise, and relevant, depending on how you think about it, either correct or relevant could be the way that you eliminate the last 2 answers. Let me know in the chat, folks, what do you see in 2 of these choices that does not make logical sense in this sentence? The fact that he loved ballet and popularized it and elevated it from a pastime to a serious thing, these facts are all in line with each other. So choices C and D, which use contrast words, make no sense whatsoever. You could also tell that C and D are both basically saying the same thing. And this goes back to a comment that David made earlier, that if 2 choices are the same, then they're both wrong. Because if one of them was right, the other one would also be right, and then you'd have a busted question with 2 correct answers. So, Madeline, you nailed it. Cybri 5, excellent, Adrienne. Very good, Zion. Yeah, we don't want any contrast. So we're going to grab choice A confidently. We're not going to spend a single nanosecond doubting ourselves, because it's A, no change. No change is just one of the 4 choices. It's a choice like any other. We're going to grab this choice, and we're going to move on with the PSAT. All right, folks. It's time to get that handout going, because I can't show you every question up here on the screen all at once. But let me grab our method. By the way, good question from Servani. What's the difference between those 3 words? There is some overlap, definitely, but correct means that it doesn't break any grammatical rules. Concise means it's not repetitive or needlessly wordy, and relevant means that it's on topic. So try questions, and I'll put this up on the screen so you don't need to memorize it. Try 2 through 5 on your own. Here's the method. Here's question 2, though of course you'll need the handout to see questions 3, 4, and 5. And when 2 minutes are up, we're going to review these and wrap up today's lesson. Good luck, everybody, and enjoy the practice. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's review these 4 questions and wrap things up. So we're going to start with number 2, which illustrates another rule of commas. This phrase right here is not essential. We don't need it in the sentence. You can always tell if you have some chunk that you can just take out and the sentence works, that is non-essential information, or if you are linguistically inclined, you might know this as the appositive. Unlike a ballet choreographer, a modern dance choreographer will often set the movements and perform. So we don't need this phrase that I've got highlighted in peach. There are 3 ways to add non-essential information into a sentence. You can use it between a pair of commas, you can insert it between a pair of parentheses, or you can insert it in between a pair of dashes. If you know this rule, then on test day, step 2 is going to get the job done. Choice B misses the first comma. Choice C randomly puts in a semicolon, and so does choice D. The only choice that does the rule right is the choice that you will confidently pick on test day without a second's hesitation, and that is choice A, no change. It's just one of the 4 choices. Grab it and move on with the test. Pause, digest, ask David, Steve, and Steve in the chat if you're not quite sure why we eliminated B, C, D so quickly and were able to find choice A. And that's a great recap question from Servani. Exactly. A positive means unnecessary information or a non-essential phrase if you want to be linguistically precise. All right, number 3. In step 1, the topic is definitely punctuation because these are the same words in the same order, which means that the punctuation is the only thing changing, so the question is testing punctuation. Now, whenever that happens, you do a break, and you ask yourself, is there a complete sentence on both sides of this break? Well, let me know in the chat, folks, is there a complete sentence on both sides of this break? No, because before this punctuation mark, we have a phrase beginning with though, and that's not a complete sentence. Though blah and blah might seem extremely different on the stage, that's not a complete sentence, that's missing a complete thought. That would be a fragment. And look at this. Once again, step 2 brings it all the way home. When the stuff before the punctuation mark is not a complete sentence, we cannot use a semicolon because a semicolon requires a complete sentence on both sides. Can't use a period because a period needs a complete sentence on both sides. And we can't use a colon. Colon does not require a complete sentence on both sides, but it does require a complete sentence to the left, which we don't have. Look at this. B for Boris. Time to grab it. Move on with the PSAT. A lot of people on the writing and language test just use their ear. They just kind of go by how everything sounds. We suggest that you use the rules because the test makers are very crafty people and they can trick your ears, but they can never trick the rules. Grab choice B and move on with the test. All right, let's take a look at number 4. This one says dropping dramatically, dropping dramatically, dropping dramatically, dropping dramatically. All right, the only thing changing is the punctuation mark. So that means we're going to use our split test. Now, this one's kind of weird because after the punctuation mark, we have a single word dramatically. That's not a complete sentence. So which choices can we eliminate in step 2? Because there's not a complete sentence after the punctuation mark. Nice work here, folks. B and D have got to go because periods and semicolons are the same thing, cough, cough. They both require a complete sentence on both sides. And dramatically is an adverb, it's not a complete sentence. Now in step 3, you would have had to check between a dash and a comma, and this is a case of testing for correctness. When you read this sentence, it just says, the numbers would keep dropping dramatically. You don't need a comma there. The comma serves no purpose there. It's just interrupting the verb from the adverb. In fact, that's what a dash does. A dash is an interruption, a self-interruption. So A is the only thing that can work here. We're going to grab choice A for awesome and skedaddle. So notice the principle. You can use a dash in place of a period, but you can't always use a period in place of a dash. Ooh, love the participation. Cybri 5 here, folks, eliminating those 2 choices. Let's get A and move on with the PSAT. Look at number 5. Profits the, profits the, profits the, profits the. Okay, same words, same order. You do your break, and you check. Is this a complete sentence on both sides? Let me know in the chat, folks. Is there a complete sentence on both sides of that break? There is. They're long, but these are 2 complete sentences. The agreement gave American companies incentive to move production southward, lower costs and higher profits. Complete sentence. The entry of China into world markets is a major contributor to less expensive metals. All contributing to decline in number of... So complete sentences on both sides. Which choices do we eliminate in step 2? Because they are not acceptable ways of connecting two complete sentences. Arthur, Adrienne, Stravani, Courtney, Cybri 5. Yep, it's a complete sentence. And yep, we're eliminating choices A and B. Cannot use a comma to connect two complete sentences, and you can't use nothing to connect two complete sentences. When we were doing that example earlier, like, how do I fix this comma splice? One of the options was not, just take the comma away, don't do punctuation. Now, between C and D, they both work grammatically, so you have to go to step 3 and check for, again, you can think of it as correctness, like in the sense of correctness of meaning, or relevance, like which of these fits what the passage is trying to say. Semicolon implies that what comes after it is introduced by what came before it. But these are just two separate facts. One of them is NAFTA, an agreement in North America, and then the other one is China, which is on the other side of the world. These are totally separate things. So logically, it would not make any sense to connect these two ideas and say that the NAFTA agreement introduces the entry of China into world markets. So we're going to get rid of choice D, as 100% of you did. Grab C for champions, and move on with this test. Ethan, we totally can remove D. Cybri 5 there. And there's also some more questions. Do please try questions 6, 7, 6 and 7 on your own for some extra practice. Try the method. Find the topic, eliminate choices based on it, and then check for correctness, conciseness, and relevance if more than one choice survives step 2. Now, we're at the hour. I never keep people late, so you're done. You're allowed to go. You're free. Officially, class is over. If you're sticking around for closing remarks, which you don't have to because you're allowed to go because class is over, thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I wish you all the best of luck on the PSAT on Wednesday or whatever day you take it.